Cash Color Cannabis, a high level of conversation on livehiphopdaily.tv. I guess this is episode part 2. Got my girl Dee-Dawkins Haigler, Dee-Dawkins Haigler in the building.
Hello, it's great to be here with you again. I enjoyed my time. The last time it was quite interesting.
The last time was epic, man. And I'm glad I had a chance to get you in here again. I know last time you did briefly speak about you wanted to run for Secretary of State of Georgia. And I love to see that you're actually making that come true this round. Speak to us about why you wanted to run for Secretary of State this year.
There's several reasons why I wanted to run for Secretary of State, and I'm glad you have me back again. But one of the main reasons I'm running for Secretary of State is probably about 5 reasons, actually, instead of one. One is the Secretary of State is actually the chief election officer in the state of Georgia. So they're responsible for all of the elections that we have. That covers everything from voter registration to the actual day that you vote. So that's very key. The Secretary of State is also responsible for all corporations in the state of Georgia. So that means if you have a business, want to start a business, you are doing your thing, you've got to go through the Secretary of State's office to get that corporation. Also, it's responsible for all professional licensing. So that means if you are a nurse, a barber, a hairstylist, a massage therapist, a physical therapist, an engineer, architect, funeral home director, you go on and on, counselor, librarian, all of those, and many other things are covered under the Secretary of State for professional licensing. It's also responsible for securities. A lot of people don't know that. So that means anything dealing with the stocks and bonds here in the state of Georgia. And if we do come online with using cryptocurrency to be able to make your purchases, pay your bills, that would be regulated by the Secretary of State's office, as well as any charities and nonprofits. But if Georgia comes into the 21st century, like it's supposed to as it relates to marijuana, that would also be regulated by the Secretary of State when you're trying to get your license to sell and grow marijuana in the state. That would come up under the Secretary of State as far as licensing.
All right, so everybody watching this show who votes, you know how I feel. Off rip, you got to vote for her because she be key in something that we eventually do want to see here in our state. I'm a fan of you running for this position because I was not a fan of the person who held it prior to you. I was not a fan of Brian Kemp. I thought the big thing that you mentioned in your first point was that you're in charge of voter registration. And this man lost 40,000 voter registration forms, African American, Latino. And I think that got brushed under the rug so quickly, and he got a chance to walk away not only with a slap on the wrist, but a chance to run for governor.
Right. They weren't lost. He just put them someplace. Loss is when you don't know where something is or that you have misplaced them. He intentionally tried to disenfranchise voters and to purge people from the voter files. And I don't know if your listeners know this, your viewers know this, but in Georgia over the past 5-6 years, we have had almost 1 million people be purged from the voter rolls in Georgia, and that disproportionately affects people of color, blacks, Hispanic, Asians, and so people are weary of the system now, both leery and weary, because they don't know if their vote will actually count. And so that's why it matters, not just that your vote count, but who counts the votes.
No, I agree with you, and it's crazy because at the time when he lost those votes, I was actually doing voter registration. I was working for Work for Progress. So part of my job was dropping off these forms at his office, and when I say if you would have walked in his office, it was a mess. I don't know how you even gathered any of them, to be completely honest with you, but it didn't look like you were even trying. And I'm not trying to be biased, but I just was not a fan of him after that.
Well, most people should not be a fan. He did a terrible job as Secretary of State, and I think he would do an even worse job as governor. And I don't know if you all seen the commercial with him with the gun and the child sitting there. I mean, you have to be very careful what message you're sending. This does not mean that we don't think people should own guns. We don't say that. It's not that we don't think that people have a right to bear arms, Second Amendment, but you do not need to have a youth, a minor, or however old he is in the commercial with that many different weapons. How do you think it would have turned out if that had been an African American sitting there with a gun and all those other guns surrounding him in that magnitude?
Yeah, no.
What message are you sending?
I agree with you. But this race is we're going to be voting very soon.
Yes, well, early voting has already started. It started April the 30th, and it goes through May 18th. Early voting every day in every county in Georgia, because this is a statewide race. I'm running statewide, but the actual election is May 22nd. And so people always say they want good people in office, people who will actually fight for the people. But when you have someone who actually fights for the people, like myself, and when you sit home on election day or you don't go during early voting, you get the kind of democracy that you go out and vote for. And so I need people to show up and show out on this election, because I am someone who has been an advocate for many issues that plague our community, and I need people to show up for me now in order to continue to do the great work that we're doing here in Georgia.
Yeah, well, I definitely became a fan of yours after our last interview. I liked your honesty, and I like the fact that you were strong in your voice. That's one thing we definitely need in a candidate, no matter what position they're running for. But speaking of Secretary of State, can you name some of the qualifications that you feel make you head and shoulders above any other candidate?
Well, I'm glad you asked that question. So I think that my experience of being a former legislator, understanding how public policy works, is going to be a great benefit, but also my background in human resource management, public administration. I have a master's in public administration. I think this particular position needs an administrator more than it needs a politician, because you're responsible for making sure that the office runs smoothly, making sure that people can get their license and their corporations in a timely manner, making sure that those who are handling the business of the state is doing it in a effective manner. As far as, you don't need someone to just be a politician and hire all their friends. You need someone who will have people answering the telephone when people call in, that's going to man the website, make sure that it's navigable, and all of those things come up under the Secretary of State's office. So you need someone who can handle those various things. And so my background, again, in human resource management, will make sure in public administration that we have someone in place that can put people where they need to be.
I understand that. And as a voter myself, I have become a little bit leery of elections. Not saying I don't participate. It's just I'm leery about what I'm seeing. Like, it took a lot in me to vote for mayor last year. And I'm going to be completely honest. I ain't going to give you the whole story. But it just took a lot for me to actually go out there and vote, because I felt like it was just, I didn't like the way they were promoting the candidates. But as you sit here and speak right now, again, me being a voter, what could you say to me, especially somebody who is a supporter of cannabis? I do want to see legalization eventually come to Georgia. I want to see an expansion of medical marijuana and what's allowed. I want to see those things. What would you say to somebody like myself as far as why they should vote for you? And if you are elected, are you still going to continue your stance on medical marijuana and on cannabis? And we're not going to see you flip-flop on that if we do get you elected, will we?
Well, actually, you won't see me flip-flop. As a matter of fact, I'll probably be pushing it some more, because I started an organization a few years ago, the Minority Cannabis Coalition, to bring parity to the industry. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that you need to keep in mind is you have to vote for people who are like-minded, who have the same agendas as you do. Yeah. Now, this is, because I support the cannabis industry, that I think everyone should be smoking or, eating or, consumption of marijuana. However, I do believe that medicinal marijuana has been very helpful. And I even believe that recreational can be used for those who are consenting adults. The problem with Georgia is that we have not caught up with the legislation that we actually passed in allowing the medicinal uses, and even this year adding more conditions such as post-traumatic stress disorder, yes, and chronic pain to the list. So now you have people who have cards who can have it, but have no place to legally access it the way that they are supposed to here in the state of Georgia. Now, what sets me apart from the other candidates that are running for Secretary of State? Well, we have 8 candidates that are currently running, 7 men, and I'm the only woman, 4 Republicans, 3 Democrats, and 1 Libertarian. Now, the difference between me and one of the ones who, on the Democratic side, is a congressman who some people, may vote for because his name is first on the ballot. That's another thing. People names who first on the ballot tend to get more votes just because of the situation, the location of their name, the placement on the ballot. So you have to be educated when you go in. But one of the things that he did while he was in Congress, there were many states who had came on board and started legalizing marijuana or for medicinal purposes. And banks, they needed to put their money into banks or to be able to conduct business. So what he did when he was in Congress, he voted for banks not to be able to have currency that came from the sale and usage of medical marijuana at that time, because it was more medicinal. So that just shows where he's going to stand on the issues. And that's the one that's on the Democratic side. And most black people tend to vote Democratic. Yeah. This is why it's important that, I'm serving in this position, because we should have already had it where the banking systems could accept the money from the sale of marijuana. You have already legalized it in the states. Why is it not possible now that banks can hold the currency? And I get it. It's still a federal law. Yeah. I get it. But still, he had the opportunity to change the law because he was there and he voted with the Republicans against it. Now, the funny thing is now you have some of these main Republicans who were so adamant, vehemently opposed to marijuana, like John Boehner when he was the Speaker of the House, now saying, oh my God, I'm going to be advisor and serve on all of these advisory committees for marijuana, and even looking into having products of his own. It's very disingenuous. We have seen too many people of color, in particular African-American men, who have been penalized and served jail time for possession of marijuana. And now to have a system that profits off the back of those who have been incarcerated is unjust. And so you need to make sure that our parity of those who want to sell it lines up with those who've already been incarcerated and have sentences. So I would even push, even though that's not the role of the Secretary of State, for those who have been incarcerated because of marijuana to receive a pardon when we do ever decide to legalize it. But in the meantime, I've been working across the state and around the country to help get decriminalization on the books. And so that's very important to me. But one of the things that I am and can do as the Secretary of State, if anyone has served jail time in Georgia, a lot of people don't know that once you serve your time, you can vote.
Yep.
Well, what happens is we did not make that information readily accessible. So there are so many people, thousands upon thousands of Georgians who don't even know that their rights have been restored and that they could be voting now.
And they're always shocked. Again, I did voter registration. Always shocked when you tell them that, no, you can vote, right? You
vote.
off papers, you done with that?
That's right. You can vote.
Yeah.
And so you have to have a Secretary of State who has that at the forefront of their issues. So that's one of the things that I would definitely do as a Secretary of State.
All right. Well, you got a few days here heading up to the actual official election. What are we going to see you at, and how are you going to be engaging voters coming up to the election?
Well, I've been traveling around the state. Each day this week, I'll be someplace different, trying to campaign and get the word out. But if people want to catch me around Georgia, because I don't know how far this goes outside of the metro Atlanta area, on Wednesday I will be in Macon for a little while. I'm going to be attending an event sponsored by the National Panhellenic Society. I'm going to come back to Gwinnett County for a women's event, women who are running for office. Friday, I'm going to be making my way towards Augusta, Milledgeville, and Sparta. On Saturday, I will be trying to head down to Savannah and round out a few things. And then Sunday, I'm going to come back to the metropolitan area. And Monday, I'm just going to be trying to make sure I have everybody motivated to go out and vote on Tuesday who did not take advantage of early voting. Let me tell you something. This election is really in the hands of the people that are watching this broadcast. If you have not voted and you know you should have voted, you didn't like the candidates before, you didn't think it was going to make a difference, trust me, it makes a difference. You are the ones that we've been waiting for. You've got to go out and vote. You've got to rally the base. You got to make those calls and get people to the polls. You should get people to the polls. Everyone in this room should be getting people to the polls. Let me tell you what happens. When you do not get people to the polls, you end up having administrations like we currently have now in the federal government. You will have people who do not need to be leading the country, let alone can't even handle their own, their own households. And then you have people in Georgia who impact and make public policy that does not benefit the masses because people fail to go vote. And let me tell you, a no vote is still a vote.
Yes.
Because when you don't vote, you're in essence voting for the people that you do not want in office. So I need you to go and vote. It is one of the best decisions that you will make this year. And you can't wait until November, because guess what? If I don't make it through the primary, you can't vote for me in November. I need you to vote for me now so I can make it to the race in November.
Well, you know what? You have our support.
Thank you.
You have our support. If you need me to help get people out to the vote, I'm definitely
down
for that. I'm definitely down for that. It's not a problem for me. I agree with you. I feel like it's one of those things where you have to get out and actually show that you want. You got to show what you want, and like I said, one of my many issues with the mayoral race was I felt like we were being once again told what to want versus, letting people actually use their voice and say, we kind of want a different voice. I want a different voice on a lot of different platforms here in Georgia. I want a different voice when it comes to being governor. I want a different voice when it comes to being mayor, to be completely honest. And I want a different voice when it comes to being Secretary of State. I understand the power of that position. And I understood the power that Brian Kemp literally threw away in front of us. And I didn't like that. And I don't like that to this day, that you were able to get away with that.
And he got away with it because of privilege. And we still have not talked about institutionalized systems of oppression that we still deal with, and race is still a big issue here in the state of Georgia. Yeah. And there are many that say they don't believe that a black person, in particular a black woman, can lead the state or can have positions of power like that of Secretary of State. But let me explain to you, people have bled and died for us to have the right to vote, and then to not go vote for a candidate who has shown herself worthy and qualified and prepared to lead us into the next generation, who will protect our voting rights. We have got to do better. And I need y'all to do better. I'm going to keep it as real as I possibly can. If you do not go and vote in this election, then you cannot blame anybody for what is going on around you. If you want to see marijuana, someone who will help push the cannabis conversation, and when you have the opportunity to vote for them and you did not, then woe on you. It's woe unto you.
Yes. If somebody wanted to join your campaign as far as being a volunteer, or even if they wanted to contribute financially, how could they do that?
That's great. They can go on my website, www.deehaigler, HAIGLER.com, www.deehaigler.com, and I'm there to tell you how to give. You can also, you can go find me on Instagram at Dawkins7. You know how DAWKHAIG7. That's Dawkins7 on Instagram. My Twitter is D-Dawkins Haigler. No hyphens, no spaces, just the letter D, Dawkins Haigler on Instagram. And Facebook, you can find me as well. However you want to give it, get in when you fit in. They can even cash out me. Trust me, $5 from each individual will go a long way. So I don't want anyone to say, well, we with you, we like what she said, and then you still don't go vote on Tuesday.
No, I 100% agree with you. I thank you for coming out tonight.
Thank you so much.
One of the few politicians who is not afraid to come to Live Hip Hop Daily Studios and interview live with us. I do appreciate you doing that.
And I appreciate you having me out tonight. It's always a joy. And remember, it's your voice, your voice. Vote. If you do not go and exercise your vote, then you won't have a voice. And so just let everyone remember, Dee-Dawkins Haigler, that's the person you need to vote for. If it's not D, it's not for me. That's what you need to get into your psyche.
She got a slogan too.
It's not for me.
If it's not D, it's not for me.
That's right.
Thank you very much for coming through tonight,
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And that's Cash Color Cannabis, a higher level of conversation. Well,
all right.
Let's do these pictures.